Hello, and welcome back to Control Alt Lead, the podcast from computing, where we talk to IT leaders at the sharp edge of strategy and technology leadership. I'm Penny Horwood, Associate Editor at Computing, and I'm joined today by not one CISO, but two CISOs. Welcome to Control Alt Lead, Don Gibson from CISO at Kinley.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hello. And welcome to Bronwyn Boyle, CISO at PPRO.
Million Penny, lovely to be here.
Hey, Bronwyn. So thank you both very much for joining us. Now, given that I have two CISOs of such repute joining us today on Control Alt Lead, you would be forgiven for thinking that we're going to be talking about cybersecurity, and we will, sort of. However, we are going to be talking about how CIOs and IT leaders can look after their cybersecurity teams, and also how cybersecurity practitioners can safeguard their own physical and mental health. So welcome again to both of you. Can we start by asking you both to tell us a little bit about yourselves and why this issue matters to you both? Don, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, not a problem. So, thanks for having me. So I've had the privilege of being caught in a number of hairy incidents. One of them was hairier than the others, and that was at Travelex when it went pop with global ransomware. I'll spare you the ugly details, but after getting the company back a few months later, at age 44, I was having heart surgery directly attributed to everything that I went through with them. Now, my boss at the time really looked after me so very well, and I can't thank him enough for that. But I then started thinking, well, hold on, I'm not the only one. There are other people. There are going to be more of these. We would try to be one of three people in life. We're either dumb, we're either people who learn by their mistakes, or we're people that learn by other people's mistakes. And they tend to be the intelligent ones. And we in cyber tend to be very intelligent, or I like to think that we are. So I like to tell my story to let other people learn from my mistakes and try to make sure that it doesn't happen to them. Because quite frankly, heart surgery sucks.
Yes, I can well imagine. Thank you. Bronwyn, what about you?
Well, so glad to be here with Don because, again, he and I have been talking on this topic previously. And much like Don, again, I had a little purple patch where, in a CISO role, there was a kind of few rolling incidents of fairly significant magnitude. And I think it was a time in my life as well where, it was a confluence of events that kind of really led me to kind of burn out and just really feeling generally quite poorly, and mental health was not in great nick. And I think, again, when you've been through the wars and you kind of come out the other side, as Don says, like, it makes you so much more mindful around the fact that other folks might be struggling, or that there might be things that we can do, again, collectively as a community and also as an industry to better safeguard our kind of mental resilience and our physical and psychological well-being. Again, very much like Don with the don't do what I did, and can we collectively all learn to do better and take care of each other? It's a subject very close to my heart.
That's great. Well, I very much appreciate you both coming here to share your experience. I think before we go into what companies and individuals can do to protect themselves, a good starting point would be to really kind of summarize why cybersecurity, even though it is just, an endlessly fascinating place to work, it can be quite a difficult environment at times, obviously, especially should the worst happen. So I'm not quite sure which one of you wants to go first, but could one of you explain why, it can be a draining place to be?
I'd normally say ladies first, but I'll happily.
You go first, and I'll follow.
Okay. I know I definitely won't get everything in this answer, but for me it's twofold. One is going back to us as biological beings, and that is a word of evolution. Inside, even with extraordinary events in the natural world, sort of unnatural events such as Chernobyl, you're still looking at decades before evolution kicks in response to the external stimuli. In the cyber world, we have literally a second before everything changes. You've got a 0 day. Something occurs, an incident happens, someone's clicked on a link, etc. There has to be a response, and CISO has to evolve literally with a snap of the fingers to be able to pivot, turn, change direction, etc. So that's the first one, and that's the kind of the larger CISO one. The second one is something around our flight or fight syndrome, adrenaline.
We knew what you meant.
When we got there eventually. I just changed my teeth, it'd be fine. So this is around how our brains process the words threat and risk. And they start off by dropping a small amount of adrenaline into our systems, just with a mention of those words. And this is why, especially in, say, SOCs, that we can become threat blind or just overloaded. And it's just too much going on all the time. And that is why people start their downward spiral.
Really resonates with me, Don, and that kind of fight or flight piece in particular. We're always worrying, right? You're always kind of waiting for the next shoe to drop or the next thing to happen. And I think that does change your neurology. It changes, your neuroplasticity. And it becomes quite difficult then to kind of, switch off and kind of get into that, non-adrenaline fueled hamster wheel, if that makes sense. I think there's a couple of other elements that I think for me might have made a bit of a dent. One is, again, the kind of the asymmetry between like responsibility and control. So we're responsible for a huge swathe of stuff, but we're not necessarily in control of it. And whether that is from trying to secure budgets or trying to influence the business or, again, trying to prevent bad guys from doing bad things, and hackers going to hack, right? But I think that can be quite, from a cognitive perspective and kind of from a kind of a processing perspective, I think that can be quite a tough paradigm to get over. And I think the other piece as well is, security can be a bit of a lonely job as well sometimes. I mean, you are influencing the business, you are sometimes having to take a stance that is maybe not universally loved or, maybe seen to be in opposition for other stakeholders in the business. And I think, again, that can just mean it just can kind of chip away sometimes at folks. So I think there's a lot of different factors that all kind of contribute here, and many of them kind of play different parts, but collectively it's a lot to absorb.
Okay, thank you for that. Possibly not doing not doing the best for the cybersecurity recruitment that we so desperately need at the moment, but yeah, thank you for that. So how can organizations support the health and well-being of their cybersecurity teams? It's, obviously the times of crisis seem to be happening more and more at the moment. The attacks are getting more in number, but also seem to be landing far more successfully. I suspect quite a lot of this probably comes down to the actual organizational culture right from the top, but what role can IT leaders play in trying to really normalize the discourse about stress and and the health of their teams and for everyone else in their company for that matter?
Well, I'll jump in if that's okay. I think your point there, Penny, about normalizing the conversation is a huge step forward. Creating kind of psychologically safe spaces for people to actually tackle this as a topic and broach it and actually explore it collectively and put it as a priority is one very positive step forward. And again, a lot of us aren't necessarily comfortable talking about this day to day. And I think, again, it's great, hearing people like Don who talk about their experiences and be very open about it so that it is destigmatizing it and it is allowing kind of people to kind of, reflect on their own position. So I think that psychological safety and normalizing the dialogue is really important. It's also great to see this getting attention at an organizational levels. I often say, we've always talked about the kind of the people, process and technology kind of trifecta in cyber. And again, when we've looked at resilience, we've always looked at kind of the people in terms of who are the bodies on the ground, but not necessarily how are they in themselves? How is their psychological resilience? And I think the fact that we're now kind of like optimizing and thinking about that as a topic as well is super helpful. So I'm encouraged to see people are kind of, again, putting in more intervention points and kind of support for folks from a mental health perspective, monitoring things like attrition and kind of sick leave to see if there's kind of indicators there that could be, data points that folks might need a little bit of extra help and support. And I think all of that kind of drives, a cultural change that hopefully will be in everybody's best interests.
Yeah, so actively monitor those potential red flags. Don.
For me, being a typical man, I'm just going to go straight into practicalities of fix. And for me, these are making sure that people know what they either have to do, have available to them, and it's practiced. So everything from desktop exercises, red team tests can be very, very useful. If you're running purple, that's absolutely brilliant because you know what's going to happen one way or the other from both sides of the argument. And even things like practical things. I saw on the BBC News last week, the government saying that everyone needs to make sure that playbooks are actually printed out. And there's things like that, but unless you're actually testing and actually running through and actually going through practicalities of it all, then unless somebody actually points it out to you, then quite often you're going to find out the wrong way. Another thing, there are other things that I like doing, which is, for example, splitting my team in two, not giving them a particular label, or call it team one, team two, rather than alpha or beta or whatever else. And so no connotations to which one's quote unquote better.
That would be a great way to get people on board.
So when it does go wrong, team two can go straight home immediately, get rest, team one can work, and then they can swap out. And they can swap out day to day to day, which means you've got the trust, you've got the capability, and they're already recovering themselves. And that sort of approach, a really pragmatic way of dealing with things there, can work wonders.
Great, thank you very much. That's very helpful. I'm going to play devil's advocate briefly. Is personal mental health not a personal responsibility issue? There has been a degree of pushback on this. I've kind of noticed it. Unfortunately, I think we can kind of roll it into the general pushback against all things DEI or well-being related. But some employers are genuinely asking, well, is it really my job to look after my employees' health? Isn't that their problem? I mean, I'm assuming you disagree with that position, but I'm just interested to hear what your thoughts on it are.
For me, kicking off, it's down to money. Pure and simple. If you've got a high team turnover, then you're going to be paying their exit, you're going to be possibly medical bills, you're then going to be paying a headhunter, potentially, or an in-house recruiter to do their work, get someone in, that's time spent actually on the recruiting side, then they have to be trained up, and then you're going to have to start the cycle again with someone else. All for spending a small amount of money and making sure they're right in the first place. I know which one I'd go for, quite frankly.
Succinct and pragmatic. I like it. Bronwyn, would you want to add anything else to that? Other than the fact that it is just the right thing to do.
Exactly that. And again, it does feel a little bit sad, isn't it, that there's this massive backlash on kind of some of the great steps forward we were making as an industry and more broadly. Yeah, and I would hate to think this is falling foul of just, again, kind of a bit of an ideological knee jerk. We're looking at a kind of profile and a demographic in our organizations now that is, it's more heterogeneous than ever. You've got 5 different generations in the workforce, all with different kind of backgrounds, different kind of proficiencies with technology, and again, much broader neurodiverse spectrum that we're acknowledging now and kind of being aware of. And again, if you are not setting your colleagues and your employees up for success in their jobs, as Don says, you're going to start feeling it in your bottom line pretty quickly, right? And you're not going to be managing risks properly, and you're also not going to be kind of servicing the customers that you're there to represent, right? So for me, it's a bit of a no-brainer, right? As Don says, like a little bit of care, investment and support on this means that your operational risk, your cost base and a lot of other factors will be in much better shape.
Good stuff. Thank you very much. I'm really glad you both said that. That's just, that pleases me. So moving now to the viewpoint of the the cybersecurity practitioners themselves, what can they do to empower themselves should they find themselves in perhaps a less than supported situation within their employer? And, it's not a great time to go job hunting. We all know that. So how can they empower themselves and look after themselves in a less than ideal world? Bronwyn, would you like to come in and tell us about some of the
thoughts? And I'd love to hear your take on this. I think one thing we're very lucky at about cyber as a community is that we are a very strong community, and there's a lot of people out there who have been there. And again, we're sharing kind of lessons from tough times we've been through. And I'm sure I know I speak for Don here because I've seen the great work he does to support others in the industry. It's a very caring community, and there's always somebody there to reach out to. So I think, using the power of our network and having those support groups and kind of having that kind of, caring mentality that people can kind of engage with and get support, especially if they're not being supported in their work, Penny. I think that's a bit of a lifeline. I also think, again, just encouraging people to speak out. I mean, it's really, really sad, when you hear of people who are either leaving the profession or even worse, who might have serious health issues or serious mental episodes because, again, they haven't been isolated. They haven't had the chance to kind of reach out and get support. So normalizing, again, those conversations and having that kind of community mindset is really important. For me as well, I mean, finding kind of the practical mental interventions that work for you as well is great. I mean, I do a variety of different mindfulness exercises. I often do those with the team as well. Like we have mindfulness and meditation Fridays where we try and take an hour out and just spend a bit of time doing some kind of like space for ourselves. There's small things we can do, but weave them into our day to day that can all really contribute just to kind of try and de-amplify some of the stressors.
Great. And because there's also Cyber Minds, isn't there, which is a separate piece of
I'd
advocacy
love
work
to
that you
talk about
do.
that exactly. So I'm
Please
absolutely,
do.
yeah, I'm honored to be on the UK board of Cybermind. So basically, it's a not-for-profit that's been established specifically to address and support cyber practitioners and their psychological well-being. And it's fantastic because it's built on proven, again, psychological protocols that have worked in kind of very high stress situations like the military or kind of conflict situations, and it's taking those protocols and adapting them for the cyber situation. And again, it's about, having those intervention points, also making sure again that there's a kind of that well-being practice that can again de-amplify your fight or flight. It can get you better emotionally regulated. It can mean that, when you're having to make those fast decisions in a hurry, as Don says, on the drop of a dime, you are actually in your best cognitive state. You're managing your emotional depletion, you're getting better sleep, etc. And it's just lovely to see something that is actually having proven, measurable, tangible outputs and positive outcomes. So, yeah, I'm delighted to be an advocate, and I'm really hopeful again about the benefits it can bring.
It's fantastic. Thank you so much. And Don, I'm reminded of some of your advice to the Computing IT Leaders Summit a couple of weeks ago, because I know your coping strategies, you admitted yourself initially, weren't perhaps the most constructive, not long term anyway. If you can, if you can sort of share some of your wisdom there, that would be wonderful.
Certainly. Well, to dial it back, I think some people need to understand a certain unfortunate, unalienable truth. Your job does not love you. And it's kind of a hard thing to say. I love my job. I really do. I love my job. And it's okay to love your job, but your job does not love you. If you were to disappear, be raptured, whatever else, everyone would be very sad. And inside 2 weeks, there'll be a job advert out and the interview process would start, and there'll be a new person in your job. Your job does not love you, but it's okay to love your job. It really is. But there does have to be some kind of balance with it. There has to be some give and take with it. Everyone's talked about work-life balance for a long time. It became far more of a thing during lockdown and the output from it and the hybrid work expectations. I see some companies are now trying to push back on it. They don't seem to be very successful. I think it's far better to give the workforce what they feel they need in that. But other things to think about. Speaking on a panel with two amazing women here, unfortunately, the cyber world still is very male-dominated, and we are trying to improve that and make it a far better world. But unfortunately, right now, it's still very male dominated. With that said, toxic masculinity really is a thing. It exists, and it doesn't have to. We don't have to do the alpha male beating our chest, going, I've done this, I've done that, whatever else, working ourselves into the ground.
Kind of hero leader thing as well, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like, I mean, yes, a good leader is the kind of one who's come rally on my flag, I'm with you, instead of go and run over the top over there.
Yeah, off you pop.
Yeah, exactly. But it's still a case of if a really good leader looks after their team and their crew, as well as looking after themselves, so leading by example. So that's for me is really important. Finding something that you enjoy and you can actually take your mind off what you're thinking. So personally, one of the things I enjoy is shooting clay pigeons. I still haven't found a good recipe for them. But it's literally a case of getting into a flow state. All I'm doing is I'm trying to hit that piece of clay over there. That's it. That's all I'm trying to do. Yes, I have the responsibility, the firearm, and
I'm quite glad you said clay pigeons. I wondered where that one was going, to be honest. But
I'm not out hunting ransomware games, promise. but no. So yeah. Yes, you still have responsibilities and et cetera, but the ability to take my mind off and switch away and just do something else entirely, really important. And I encourage anyone listening to this to find something that they truly enjoy and that they can do that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That sounds like excellent advice to me for many reasons. So I'd like to finish really by asking you both how you think this discussion is likely to evolve. I mean, I know you're not fortune tellers, but I mean, certainly companies and individuals do generally, people are happier to be kind of open about mental health concerns in particular. There's been lots of great role models, and it's something that collectively, societally, we are talking about more. But whilst the talk has been forthcoming, it's difficult to ignore the fact that companies aren't really necessarily doing things that would actually, they'll talk about mental health sessions, they'll run lunchtime sessions and all the rest of it, but they won't actually do anything or they're more reluctant to do the things that would tangibly make their employees' lives easier, employing more people being one such suggestion. So, I'd love to hear what you both think about that and whether you think, is this likely to change?
A few thoughts from me. I think Don, again, was so opposite when he was saying it's about the money sometimes here. And again, I think when you can show return on investment and you can show the benefits of actually spending time and care and thought on this, that is a bit of a game changer. And as I mentioned, I've been very heartened about the work that CyberMinds is doing. I mean, we're working with organizations all over the globe and we're building up very clear statistics and kind of ROI metrics on how that investment is paying off and what it means in terms of satisfaction of colleagues, less attrition, less sick leave, all of those kind of positive indicators that, again, just help your business run better, right? So I think if we want to be very kind of bare bones about it, that is hard to argue with. I think the other point as well, Penny, we were talking about John's point about diversity in cyber is so important. Some of the research that CyberMinds has done has said that actually stress can impact 3 communities at quite a high level. One is women, because again, they tend to get more emotionally depleted. Again, this is from the research. The other is neurodiverse folks, and the other is Gen Z. Now, that's our talent pipeline right there. If we are going to open the industry, and again, as you rightly say, Penny, like avoid a PR issue, right? Because again, how do we make cyber attractive to new entrants who may find it more struggling? I think if we're taking these intervention points and building it into our practice, like as Don says, our red teaming, like our blue teaming, like our crisis simulations, if we're also saying, hey, this is what we're doing actively to help our psychological resilience, that's a whole different narrative and a whole different, hopefully successful, happy, thriving cyber professional community.
Yes, I was just thinking, because especially an article I wrote recently, which I think you commented on, Bronwyn, was
Yes.
We need to find more unconventional talent and sort of scoop that up into the white hat world rather than the kind of criminal underworld. So yeah, that just amplifies the logic, doesn't it? Yeah, Don, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I've got to say, Bronwyn's nail on the head as ever. For me, that there's 2 other things to add into there. One is the continuation of the proofs in the pudding. And so when you're actually delivering stuff and can see things are going on, then not only is it working for you, but you'll also get a very good reputation. People do talk externally, and that means you get people who are far more open to those kind of ideas and thought processes, even looking to join with you and go forward. The only other one is slightly morbid, is the fact that people who have, shall we say, more hardened views on this tend to be of an older generation. I include myself in that, and they are starting to wash out through. But they are starting to naturally retire, and therefore people in Generation X and through to millennials are starting to rise up the ladder inside managerial functions, and they will naturally bring their own flavour to it. And I think there'll be a positive outcome for this. I feel that there's good things on the horizon. It's just right now, especially with kind of the major attacks that people are seeing and hearing and still feeling the effects of, and no doubt there's still going to be more on the horizon. We're still going to be feeling the effects for some time, but I think people are learning and growing, and conversations like this can only help.
Fantastic. Well, that is a very positive note on which to end. So thank you very much indeed. It's sad that we have to wrap up, actually, because I could talk about this for ages, but we have to finish. So Don Gibson from Kinley, Bronwyn Boyle from PPRO, thank you so much for your time and your insights this afternoon. It's been a slight departure from our usual Control-Alt-Lead format, but a very, very interesting and a very insightful one too, I think. So thank you to you for listening to this episode of Control-Alt-Lead. We've got some fantastic guests lined up for future episodes, so please do look out for those. And in the meantime, please head to computing.co.uk for more IT leader interviews, research and analysis.